I should have known something was wrong when Margot handed me the champagne flutes instead of asking me to join the toast. But I was too focused on not dropping the tray, too focused on keeping my face neutral, while she laughed with her circle of art world elites, too focused on pretending I belonged there at all. The crystal chandelier above us cast fractured light across the exhibition hall, and I caught my reflection in one of the windows, a woman in a black dress that cost more than my first car, holding a tray like staff at my own husband's family estate. That's when I knew. 8 years of marriage, and I was still the help. Sienna, darling. Margot's voice cut through the murmur of conversation like a blade wrapped in silk. She didn't even look at me. We are low on the Veuve Clicquot. Be a dear and fetch another case from the cellar, would you? Across the room, maybe 10 feet away, my husband Tobias stood examining a painting. A Rothko, I think. Or maybe a Debenkorn. I'd stopped trying to keep track of which overpriced rectangles his mother was collecting this season. He glanced up when Margot spoke. Our eyes met for exactly 2 seconds. Then he looked back down at his auction catalogue, his fingers tracing the glossy pages like they held answers to questions he'd never asked. He said nothing. He always said nothing. I set down the tray and walked toward the cellar stairs, my heels clicking against the original hardwood floors that I'd paid to restore last summer. $15,000 to save wood that had been laid in 1893, and Margot had thanked the contractor, not me. The check had come from my account, drawn on my earnings from the Cincinnati Bridge project, but somehow in the retelling it became the foundation's investment in preservation. Everything here was like that. My money, their legacy. My work, their story. The wine cellar was cool and dark, smelling of oak and earth and old money, though technically, none of the money down here was old at all. It was mine, converted into bottles that people with names like Ashford and Vanderbilt would sip while discussing which Caribbean island was least spoiled by tourism. I pulled out my phone, standing between racks of Bordeaux that cost more per bottle than my father made in a week welding at the shipyard. One new message. From Celeste, my sister-in-law. It was a photo from upstairs, posted to her Instagram 20 minutes ago. The caption read, "When family gatherings require full staff #blessed #estate living #Willowmere." The photo showed the great room, all golden light and beautiful people. And there, in the background, slightly out of focus but unmistakable, was me. Holding the champagne tray. Looking like exactly what Margot wanted everyone to think I was. 847 likes already. I stood there in the wine cellar, surrounded by bottles I'd paid for, in a house I'd been keeping financially afloat for years, looking at a photo that erased me while simultaneously putting me on display. My hands were shaking. I realized I'd been holding my breath. That's when I made the call. "Iris," I said when my attorney picked up. "It's time. Tomorrow morning, everything goes live." I walked back upstairs with the champagne, and I poured it, and I smiled, and I said nothing. Because I'd learned from the best. Sometimes silence is the loudest thing in the room. Sometimes you wait until you have all the pieces in place. Sometimes you let people think you're weak right up until the moment you prove you've been strong enough to carry them all along. The next morning was a Sunday, which meant brunch on the terrace. This was Margot's favorite ritual, a performance of family harmony that happened every week whether we felt harmonious or not. The September air was crisp, touched with the first hint of autumn, and the lake beyond the sculpture garden was perfectly still. Margot presided over the table like a queen at court, reading the society pages from the Times, occasionally making cutting remarks about who'd been photographed at which gala wearing what she considered the wrong designer. Celeste was on her phone, photographing her avocado toast from 7 different angles, each photo presumably inferior to the last. Tobias studied an auction catalogue, making notes in the margins about estimated values and provenance. None of them looked at each other. None of them looked at me. That's when Marcus Webb walked onto the terrace. Marcus was my property consultant, a man in his 50s with the kind of face that had seen every type of real estate deal and couldn't be shocked by any of them. He wore a charcoal suit and carried a leather portfolio, and he walked with the confidence of someone delivering news he knew was going to detonate. "Mrs. Ashford," he said, nodding to Margot. Then he turned to me. "Mrs. Sienna Ashford. Good morning." Margot glanced up from her newspaper, one perfectly sculpted eyebrow raised. "Marcus. I wasn't aware we had an appointment." "We don't," Marcus said. He was looking at me, not her. "I'm here to inform you that the ownership transfer documents have been filed with the county as requested. As of 8 o'clock this morning, Willowmere Estate is registered to Grayston Holdings LLC. He opened the portfolio and handed me a folder. The movement was deliberate, formal. Legal. Margot set down her coffee cup. The porcelain made a sharp sound against the saucer. "I'm sorry, what transfer?" "Marcus, there must be some mistake." "No mistake, Mrs. Ashford." Marcus's voice was professionally neutral, the tone of someone who'd rehearsed this moment. "Mrs. Sienna Ashford is the sole principal of Grayston Holdings. The estate, including the main house, guest cottages, grounds, and all associated structures, is now registered under her ownership." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the lake water lapping at the dock 300 feet away. Celeste's phone clattered onto the table. Tobias went pale, the auction catalogue sliding from his fingers. Margot's hand trembled slightly, making her teacup rattle, but her voice when she spoke was steel wrapped in velvet. "This is absurd. Tobias, call Harrison immediately." Harrison was the family attorney, a man who'd gone to Yale with Margot's late husband and treated the Ashford family like minor royalty. I stood up. I'd worn my navy suit this morning, the one I'd bought for the Cincinnati project presentation. Power suit, they called it. I'd always thought that was silly. Power doesn't come from clothing. Power comes from knowing exactly where all the load-bearing walls are. "There's no need to call Harrison," I said. My voice sounded different. Clearer. "He was notified last night. Margot, you've been managing an estate you haven't owned for 6 months. I bought the mortgage when the foundation defaulted in 2023. I've been covering the property taxes since 2019. I paid for last night's gala. The wine you drank, the flowers you arranged, the musicians you hired. I own Willowmere." Tobias made a sound like he'd been punched. "Sienna, what are you talking about?" "The library," I said. "Now? All of you." I walked inside, and after a moment of stunned silence, they followed. The library had always been my favorite room in the house, maybe because it was the one place Margot rarely went. Books weren't decorative enough for her taste. The morning sun came through the tall windows, falling across the mahogany table where I'd spread out documents the night before. Each piece of paper was a revelation I'd been preparing for months. "Sit down," I said. It wasn't a request. They Saturday. Even Margot. I picked up the first document. Mortgage default notice. March 2022. The Ashford Cultural Foundation missed 3 consecutive payments on the estate loan. The bank initiated foreclosure proceedings. These notices were sent to the foundation's registered address. I looked at Margot. "Your private office. You intercepted every single one." Tobias never saw them. Tobias turned to his mother. "What is she talking about?" Margot's face was composed, but I saw the muscle twitching in her jaw. The foundation always operates at a slight deficit. That's normal for cultural organizations. We have donors, board support. You had one donor, I interrupted. Me? I pulled out the next document. Purchase agreement. June 2023. Grayston Holdings LLC purchased the defaulted mortgage for $2.3 million. Below market value, because the bank wanted it off their books. You received notice of the sale, Margot. You assumed it was just another creditor. You never investigated who Grayston actually was. I spread out the next set of papers like I was dealing cards. Each one was a punch to their carefully constructed reality. Foundation Financial Records. 2019 through 2024. Anonymous donations from Grayston Holdings. $740,000. Property tax payments under the foundation's name, but drawn from my personal accounts, $290,000. Emergency repairs to the boathouse, the sculpture garden drainage, the main house roof, $180,000. Event funding, including last night's gala, $95,000. I looked at each of them. Celeste's eyes were wide. Tobias looked like he might be sick. Margot sat perfectly still, a statue of aristocratic fury. Total contribution, $1,847,000, I said. Over 8 years. That's what it cost to keep this place running while you all pretended it ran itself. Why didn't you tell me? Tobias's voice cracked. Sienna, why didn't you say something? I felt something break inside my chest. It might have been the last piece of whatever I'd been holding on to. I did tell you, I said quietly. 7 times, Tobias. I told you 7 times. The first time was in 2019, when the property tax notice came and there was no money in the foundation account. You said, Mother knows best about the estate. The second time was in 2020 when the roof was leaking into the guest wing. You said, let's not make waves. The third time was Christmas of 2021 when I showed you the bank statements. You said, can we discuss this after the holidays? My voice was getting louder. I couldn't stop it. Which holidays, Tobias? We've had 96 holidays in 8 years. 96 opportunities for you to choose me over your mother's feelings. 96 times you chose silence. If you're watching this and you've ever felt invisible in your own life, hit that subscribe button. Because this story is about what happens when invisible people decide they are done disappearing. This is emotional manipulation, Margot said, her voice cold. You're upset, Sienna. I understand that. Perhaps we've taken you for granted. But this, she gestured at the documents, this is vindictive. We are family. We are not family. The words came out flat. Final. We are a hierarchy, and I've been at the bottom for 8 years. But that ends today. I pulled out my laptop and turned it to face them. The screen showed a financial forensics report, the kind that gets submitted as evidence in fraud cases. Iris Chen, my attorney, had arrived while we were talking. She stepped forward now, her expression professionally detached. Good morning, Iris said. I am Ms. Reeves's legal counsel. What you're looking at is a comprehensive audit of the Ashford Cultural Foundation's finances from 2018 through present day. I'll summarize the findings. She clicked through slides with the efficiency of someone who'd prosecuted white-collar crime for 15 years before going into private practice. Discovery 1. Unauthorized rental income. Mrs. Margot Ashford has been renting the guest cottages to personal friends and acquaintances, collecting approximately $45,000 annually for the past 5 years. This income was never reported to the Foundation's board, never entered into Foundation accounts, and was deposited directly into Mrs. Ashford's personal bank account at First National. Margot's face went white. Those were personal arrangements. Informal. Illegal, Iris corrected. The cottages are Foundation property. Any income generated is Foundation income. What you did is called embezzlement. Celeste made a small sound. Iris ignored her and continued. Discovery 2, Fabricated Expenses. Miss Celeste Ashford submitted $67,000 in marketing expenses over 3 years, categorized as promotional events for the foundation. Our investigation reveals these expenses included $12,000 paid to a photographer, who is Ms. Ashford's romantic partner, $8,000 for content creation equipment that was personal camera gear, $15,000 for brand partnerships that were actually gifts to other social media influencers, and zero documented return on investment for the foundation. I was building our brand, Celeste whispered. Building awareness. You were stealing, I said. You were using foundation money to buy yourself followers. Iris wasn't done. Discovery 3, Art Acquisition Fraud. Mr. Tobias Ashford has purchased 17 pieces for the foundation's collection over the past 4 years. Independent appraisals show these pieces were valued 30 to 40% above market rates. The gallery that sold these pieces paid commission kickbacks to a consultant. That consultant operated through an LLC registered to, she paused, Mrs. Margot Ashford's sister, Catherine Ashford Price. Tobias stood up so fast his chair fell over. I didn't know. Mother, you said those were fair market prices. You said Catherine was helping us get quality pieces. Sit down, Tobias. Margot's voice could have frozen the lake. Saturday. The criminal implications are severe, Iris continued. Wire fraud, non-profit fraud, tax evasion. The foundation is a registered 501(c)(3). Misappropriation of donated funds, falsified expense records, and kickback schemes are federal offenses. You wouldn't dare prosecute us, Margot said. Her hands were shaking now, actually visibly shaking. The scandal. The publicity. You destroy the Ashford name. I leaned forward, placing my palms flat on the table. You destroyed my name every time you introduced me as Tobias's wife who does something technical. You destroyed my dignity every time you handed me a serving tray at my own family events. You destroyed my trust every time you cashed checks I wrote while pretending I was nothing. The Ashford name can burn for all I care. Sienna, please. Tobias was crying now. Actually crying. I'd never seen him cry. Let's fix this quietly. As a family. We can make this right. I stood up and walked to the window. The lake was still perfectly calm. A heron stood in the shallows, waiting for fish. Patient. Still. Deadly when it struck. We are not a family, I said without turning around. A family defends each other. A family sees each other. You married me because I was different from your world, Tobias. Novel. A bridge engineer, how bohemian. How refreshingly middle class. But you never defended me in your world. You brought me to the aquarium and left me outside the glass. I turned to face him. Where were you when your mother introduced me to the foundation board as the engineer girl Tobias brought home? Where were you when Celeste live streamed my panic attack after my father died and called it dramatic aunt content? Where were you last Christmas when your mother gave me a gift card to Macy's while Celeste got a sapphire necklace that belonged to your grandmother? I didn't see. You didn't want to see. My voice cracked. Because seeing would have required choosing. And you've never chosen me. Not once in 8 years. I reached into my bag and pulled out 2 envelopes. I placed them on the table in front of him. You have until 6 o'clock tonight, I said. Envelope 1 contains divorce papers and a settlement offer. It's generous. You walk away with your reputation, a lump sum, and we never speak again. Envelope 2 contains a joint statement about restructuring family involvement in the foundation. You stay on as a consultant, draw a salary, and help transition the estate to new management. Your mother is removed from all positions, but quietly. No criminal charges filed if full restitution is made within 90 days. And if I choose neither? His voice was barely a whisper. Then at 6:01, I make the choice for you. And I promise you won't like it. I walked out of the library, leaving them with the wreckage of their illusions. The boathouse was my refuge. I'd spent the afternoon there, sitting in the old rowboat that nobody used anymore, letting the gentle rocking calm the rage that still burned in my chest. My phone was off. The world could wait. My father had been a welder at the Philadelphia shipyards. He died 3 years ago, a heart attack on the job, gone before the ambulance arrived. He taught me that strong joints require 3 things: clean surfaces, proper alignment, and heat at the right moment. You can't force metal that isn't ready. You can't join materials that don't match. I'd been trying to weld myself to people made of different elements. The heat had just warped me. I remembered the first time I brought Tobias home to meet my parents. My mother had made lasagna, her specialty, and my father had worn his good shirt, the one without any burn marks from welding sparks. We lived in a row house in Fishtown, 3 bedrooms for 5 people, walls so thin you could hear the neighbors arguing about baseball. Tobias had been sweet that night. Charming. He'd asked my father about his work, seemed genuinely interested in the ships being built. My mother had loved him. He's kind, she'd told me later. That matters more than anything. But kind wasn't the same as strong. Kind wasn't the same as brave. At our wedding, Margot had spent the entire reception explaining to anyone who would listen that it was being held at a charming ethnic venue, my uncle's Polish community center, instead of the country club where Ashford weddings were traditionally held. She'd smiled while she said it, but the message was clear: this was slumming. This was Tobias's rebellion phase. This wouldn't last. She'd been half right. The marriage had lasted. I just hadn't. My phone alarm went off at 5:45. Time to go back. I found them in the great room. All 3 of them. Tobias stood by the fireplace, holding both envelopes. Unopened. Well? I said. I can't choose. His voice was hollow. Sienna, this is too big. Too fast. I need more time. You've had 8 years. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed, and it sounded wrong. Broken. You want to talk about fair? Fair would be you defending me one time. One single time. Today was that time, Tobias. Today was the day you could have chosen me. Could have looked at everything your family did and said, this is wrong. I'm with my wife. But you can't do it. You can't even open the envelopes. Margot stood up. She was trembling with rage, all her practiced composure finally cracking. You ungrateful, social climbing little nobody. We took you in. We gave you access to our world, our name, our connections. We made you someone. You gave me nothing I didn't pay for. I was shouting now. Triple. I paid triple for everything. The cost of admission, the cost of maintaining it, and the cost of pretending I was grateful for the privilege of being ignored. Marcus Webb stepped into the room, followed by Iris. I hadn't asked them to come, but I was grateful they had. Ms. Ashford asked us to be here at 6, Marcus said. He pulled out a tablet and turned it toward them. This is the accounting of Ms. Reeves's financial contributions to Willowmere Estate and the Ashford Cultural Foundation. The screen showed everything. Every wire transfer, every covered expense, every bailout. The total at the bottom, $1,847,000. He swiped to the next screen. This is the total compensation Ms. Reeves has received for her contributions. The number was 0. And this, he swiped again, is the number of times Ms. Reeves has been publicly acknowledged for her support. 0 again. Iris stepped forward. She was carrying a different folder now. These are eviction notices. You have 72 hours to vacate the main house and all guest cottages. Personal effects only. Everything else remains as estate property. Celeste made a choking sound. You can't just throw us out. I can and I am, I said. The estate is mine. You're trespassing. The foundation, Margot started. Is being dissolved, Iris interrupted. Assets will be liquidated to cover debts and restitution. What remains will be donated to actual charitable organizations. Ones that don't exist to fund your lifestyle. And the criminal charges. Margot's voice was quiet now. Defeated. Are being filed with the district attorney's office tomorrow morning unless full restitution is made within 72 hours, Iris said. Wire fraud, non-profit fraud, tax evasion. The evidence is comprehensive. Celeste's hand moved toward her phone. Iris caught the movement. I'd strongly advise against live streaming this, Ms. Ashford. Anything you say or post can and will be used as evidence. Your previous posts are already being reviewed by investigators. Celeste's face drained of color. She set the phone down like it had burned her. Tobias was still standing there, holding the unopened envelopes. He looked at me with something that might have been love or might have been loss. Maybe they were the same thing. I never meant to hurt you, he said. I know, I said. And I did know. That was the tragedy of it. He'd never meant to hurt me. He'd just never meant to protect me either. But intention doesn't change impact. You stood by and watched me disappear. I walked out of Willowmere Estate at 6:15 that evening. I didn't look back. 3 months later, the news broke. Former society matriarch sentenced in foundation fraud case. Margot got 18 months probation, $125,000 in restitution, and 500 hours of community service. Celeste paid $45,000 in fines and was permanently banned from serving on any non-profit board. Tobias avoided criminal charges, but lost everything else. He moved to Portland, I heard. Somewhere far from his mother's shadow. We divorced quietly. He didn't fight it. I spent those 3 months transforming Willowmere. The guest cottages became studio spaces. The exhibition hall became a lecture center. The sculpture garden became an outdoor classroom. I hired architects, engineers, educators. I poured the same energy I'd once used to keep the Ashford fantasy alive into building something real. The Willowmere Institute for Structural Arts opened in December. A place for students who didn't see themselves in traditional spaces. First-generation college kids. Scholarship students. People who understood that strength comes from supporting weight, not just looking beautiful while doing it. I was giving a lecture when it hit me. Not the realization that I'd won, I'd known that for months. But the realization that winning hadn't been the point. The point was building something that served a purpose beyond ego. A structure's strength isn't just about materials, I told my students. 40 of them, diverse backgrounds, hungry eyes. It's about honest assessment. If you know a beam is failing but pretend it's fine, you haven't solved anything. You've just delayed collapse. The same applies to relationships, institutions, systems. Sometimes the most structurally sound decision is demolition and rebuild. After class, a young woman approached me. She had dark eyes and calloused hands and an expression I recognized, someone who'd fought for every opportunity. Ms. Reeves. I'm Maya. First-generation student. Engineering felt impossible until I heard about this place. She hesitated. Thank you. What's your focus? I asked. Sustainable bridge design for rural communities. I felt something shift in my chest. Come to my office hours tomorrow. I have some projects you might find interesting. As she walked away, I saw myself at 22. Brilliant and hungry, and convinced I'd never belong anywhere that mattered. I'd spent 8 years invisible in someone else's story. Now I was building a place where people like us were the story. That evening, I walked down to the dock. The same place where I'd stood a year ago, looking at Celeste's Instagram post, feeling my entire existence reduced to background noise in someone else's aesthetic. The lake was calm. The institute buildings glowed warm behind me. Through the windows, I could see students working late, bent over blueprints and models, building their futures. My phone buzzed. A call from Tobias. The first in 2 months. I looked at his name on the screen. For a moment, just a moment, I felt the pull of old habits. Answer. Smooth things over. Make it easier for him. Then I deleted his contact. I opened a different folder on my phone instead, Institute Year 2 plans. Expansion proposals. New partnerships. A scholarship fund I was creating in my father's name. If you've stayed with me this far, I want you to know something. This isn't a revenge story. Revenge would mean I still cared. This is a reconstruction story. This is about taking the materials of a collapsed structure and building something that serves a purpose. I'm not the ghost in anyone's machine anymore. I'm the architect. And this time, I'm building for me. I turned away from the water and walked back toward the light. Behind me, the lake whispered against the shore. Ahead of me, the future waited, full of blueprints and possibilities and people who would see me, really see me, for exactly who I was. The dock boards creaked under my feet. Somewhere in the institute, someone laughed. A real laugh, not a performance. I smiled. It felt like coming home.